We're in Nahum chapter 2, verse 13. Behold, I am against thee, saith the Lord of hosts, and I will burn her chariots in the smoke, and the sword shall devour thy young lions, and I will cut off thy prey from the earth, and the voice of thy messengers shall no more be heard. We remember the destruction of Nineveh. She is the she that's been spoken of in this text. Notice the word behold. That word is a strong word. It's not just a glimpse or a quick look at something. It is a fixing of the eyes on something, really what we might call staring, noticing all the details. That's something that I was trained to do many, many years ago in the military. And the details many times will allow you to know some things that you can't know otherwise. I wish I could still see the details. When I look out at y'all in the audience, I can't see the details anymore. I see you and I know who you are, but I can't see the details. Except for Catrice, she's close enough. But this word shows a fixation on something, wanting to know the details, wanting to see it, and thus examining something with great care. It's also the idea of what is about to be said is important, and you'd better pay close attention to it. So that's the idea behind this word. What is important is to really hear what Jehovah is saying against Nineveh. If God is against one, it'd be like the 5 best pro basketball players. You can figure out whichever ones you think are the best that have ever been playing against 5 fourth graders. They don't have a chance. That is the 4th graders. There's no chance in the world that they can win. I remember years ago, I used to teach basketball to a 4th grade team, and me and the other coach, we would sometimes play against the 5 of them, and they didn't have a chance. Why? Well, obviously they didn't have the skill sets that we had. Number 2, they weren't as tall as we are, so we got all the rebounds. They didn't have a chance. That's what it's like to go against God. There's no chance. We can't go against God and hope to win. Notice the chariots in that time. They were the modern equivalent of our army tanks. During the Roman times, they had what was called the turtle, and it was basically men with many legs marching in such a way with their shields protecting them. It was like a tank. They just kept on pushing through and defeated almost anybody that came in contact with them. But God says He's going to destroy them, and it's going to be destroyed as easily as if a man stepped on an ant. Total destruction. I will cut off thy prey from the earth. This kind of gives us the idea, this phrase is puzzling in a sense. To cut off means to cut off or to cut down or to cut something asunder. By implication, then, it means to destroy something, to consume something. But it's this is a little puzzling because God is not going to destroy their prey. In fact, what He's going to be doing is cutting them off from going after their normal prey. Their normal prey had been all the other nations of the world. They had consumed nation after nation, city after city. But God's going to cut it off where they can't go after them anymore. Why would He destroy the young lion's prey? It's the idea that even those who were formerly their prey, they're still there, but they won't be able to attack them anymore. They won't be able to destroy them. They won't be able to consume them. They won't be able to take away all of their finances, etc. Nineveh's messengers, notice he says, shall no more be heard. Messengers. They will no longer, these messengers that they sent out, will no longer be able to demand submission by the people they talk to. They will no longer be able to extort tribute. They will no longer be able to command fear. They will no longer be able to deceive the people of other nations as they had in the past. They had been doing all of these things. They would send their representative to a city and say, now if you don't give us more tribute, or give us tribute in the first place, then here's what we're going to do to you. And guess what? They got it. Why? Because their armies were so superior in that time to others, and they had such a large volume. In those times, armies won not so much by skill. That played a part in it. Don't misunderstand that. But armies of the time of Nineveh, they won by bulk. The larger the army they had it made. They're going to defeat you, as long as that army is a lot bigger than your army. Assyria would no longer exist. That's why their messengers weren't going to be able to go and demand and extort more tribute from the people. That's why their demands would not be met to surrender. Look at chapter 3. Now this chapter is going to show the sins of Nineveh, which caused God to destroy them. And when we look at verse 1, he says, "Woe to the bloody city! It is all full of lies and robbery. The prey departeth not." Bloody city? Why is Nineveh called a bloody city? Well, we've already noticed some of that when we studied Jonah, and we've mentioned it a few times now, because of all the blood that they shed. Think about another situation that we have in the scriptures where David was not allowed to build the temple to God. He wanted to. He had all the best intentions. It wasn't necessarily something that was wrong for him to do, because he lived in a nice house with cedar wood and all of these things. And so he looked at the tabernacle that housed a temporary dwelling that housed the ark, etc., and wanted to build a more permanent structure in Jerusalem. It wasn't bad that what he wanted to do, wasn't wrong, but God wouldn't let him. Why? Because of all the blood that he had shed. And now remember something. That was blood that God demanded of David to do, to take his armies and to fight the Philistines, to destroy the enemies of God. And yet, because of all the blood that he shed, he was not allowed to build the temple. The word bloody also refers to blood that of those who shed others' blood. And this is often portrayed in the scriptures. The idea seems to be that Nineveh was full of murder and murderers, and it was a city where it had become unsafe to even be there. And yet, Nineveh provided safety for these robbers. It kind of reminds me of what we saw in the time of the castles and that period of time in history, when the places where the monks went, they would often provide shelter for robbers and others. Kind of reminds me of what's being done today in our so-called sanctuary cities. Provide a safe place for them. Oh, you can't take them out of here. Why not? They're murderers. Oh no, we can't do that. Nineveh had been a ruthless destroyer of life. They had shed blood on a huge scale. And to them, the shedding of blood meant no more to them than squashing a fly. So what? We killed these people. We destroyed them. We destroyed their cities. We took all their wealth. So what? That's the idea that they had. Nineveh was also said to be full of lies and robbery. Excuse me a second. I bit my tongue really bad the other day, and I just did it again. Funny how you do something like that and you can't seem to avoid it, right? The word lies, gosh. Strong says that this word is used figuratively for hypocrisy. Brown Driver and Brown said it's a word used for lying and deception. Hypocrisy, deception. They were full of hypocrisy. They were full of deception. And by the way, deception is a lie, whether we tell someone a particular thing to make them think something that isn't true, or whether we just by accident tell it. Deception is still a lie. And it possibly goes back to these ambassadors that we saw in verse 13 of chapter 2. Their deceptions wouldn't be anymore. They wouldn't be able to deceive the people that they spoke to. They wouldn't be able to deceive anyone again. Most likely, I believe that it speaks to the fact of their being treaty breakers. They would not honor any treaties that they had. Again, we can look at nations in our own time that have a habit of making a treaty with someone and then turning right around and breaking that treaty. And this has been something that's gone on for most of all of time. People that want to deceive others into thinking there's some benefit to them by engaging in a treaty between the two people, and next thing you know, that treaty is broken and the results are terrible. Look at verses 2 and 3. The noise of a whip, excuse me, and the noise of the rattling of wheels, and of the prancing horses, and of the jumping chariots. The horsemen lifted up both the bright sword and the glittering spear, and there is a multitude of slain, and a great number of carcasses, and there is none end of their corpses. They stumble upon their corpses. These verses speak of the past, what they've done to others, how they treated other people. It speaks of what they would do to anyone if given the chance. Now notice it's observed that the same sounds and the scenes are going to be true when Assyria's enemies destroy them. What goes around comes around, so to speak. They're going to get what they deserve. They're going to get what they had done to others. But notice the carnage in ancient warfare. Multitudes of carcasses would pile up on the battlefield. Again, this was close quarter stuff that they went through. It wasn't like today where we send a drone in and we watch from space as this drone goes down and you see that little X on the target, and the next thing you know it hits that Jeep or truck or whatever it is, and there ain't nothing left. Not like that. These armies were hand to hand, face to face. There would be many, many bodies. It's messy. Hand-to-hand fighting is messy. And that was the rule of the day, hand-to-hand. In the American Civil War, at the Battle of Shiloh, which was fought for only 2 days, I've got relatives there. I've seen the grave, their grave there. When I was a young boy, Daddy took me there and showed them to me. But in that battle, 2 days, 1,740 Union soldiers died. 1,723 Confederate soldiers died. You see how messy this was? They weren't exactly hand-to-hand, although they did engage in some hand-to-hand, but they were close quarters. And the total wounded from both sides was over 16,000. Many of them lost an arm, a leg, 2 legs, because of the injuries being so severe. In Roman times, at the Battle of Cain, fought against Hammurabi in 216 BC, according to the historian Golovic, out of 80,000 Roman soldiers, only 13,000 survived. Think about that. Close quarter combat. That should tell us something about Nineveh. These armies would have been huge. Later, if we study our secular history, we learn that the Persian army, when they went to attack Greece, had over 1 million foot soldiers. Imagine that as they went to attack Greece. Look at Nahum 3 and verse 4. Because of the multitude of the whoredoms of the well-favored harlot, the mistress of witchcrafts, that selleth nations through her whoredoms and families through her witchcrafts. Notice Nineveh is described as a well-favored harlot, a prostitute. What does a prostitute do to entice people? They use their charm. They try and dress themselves in such a way to entice their victim. Well, that's what Nineveh did to the nations around them, so the imagery is well used here. Amerding made this statement. He said, in the Bible, prostitution carries the connotation of treachery and unfaithfulness. Judges 2:17, defilement, Leviticus 20:3-5, and lust, or inordinate desire, Ezekiel 23:5-21. A prostitute deceives people into believing that she has something that's desirable and beneficial to the one they're enticing. Well, Nineveh did exactly the same thing. They deceived people into believing that she was all-powerful, that she had the ability to provide the people that she conquered or threatened to conquer with safety, that people ought to lead or to follow her lead in violence toward others, that people ought to follow her gods, and if they did, if they followed her lead in violence, if they followed her gods, they would prosper. They would have wealth. When you study Israel in the time of the judges, you'll see the Israelites sometimes following after the idols of the people around them because they thought God wasn't taking care of them, and to follow these gods would make them rich. Go back in time just a little bit to Moses. He came down from the mount after receiving the 10 commandments, the 10 words. And what did he see? Oh, they'd made a golden calf and they were worshiping. Well, why did they make that golden calf? If you back up in the scriptures just a little bit, you see that they were getting concerned. Moses has been gone for a long time. Remember, he spent 40 days and 40 nights up there with God. And they were getting concerned. And they said, why were we let out here to die? We were better off in Egypt. Let's make a golden calf. We'll be better off. Well, let's take the gods we served before. Implied wealth, deception. A prostitute treats her victim, her suitor, as a victim. Uses them, throws them away for what she can get from them. At times, the word whoredom is used of God's people. Did you notice that in the scriptures? When they commit idolatry, they're guilty of committing whoredoms, which is adultery toward God. Well, what's adultery? Unfaithfulness to a marriage partner. God is our marriage partner. God said in Jeremiah 13 and verse 27, I have seen thine adulteries. Who was he speaking about as committing adultery? And who were they committing adultery against? It was his people against him. Why? Because of their worshiping idols. And thy names, the lewdness of thy whoredom, and thine abominations on the hills of the fields. Woe unto thee, O Jerusalem! Wilt thou not be made clean? When shall it once be? What took place on the hills? What was he talking about? That was the place where the idolaters went and built their idols and bowed down to them and involved themselves in all kinds of lewd demonstrations and involvement with each other. Look at Hosea 4 and verse 13. They sacrifice on the tops of the mountains, their idols, and burn incense upon the hills. Where were they supposed to make their sacrifices? At the temple, at the altar of God. Where were they supposed to burn their incense? In the holy place. Not on the hills and under the oaks and the poplars and the elms, as he said they were doing in Hosea 4:13. Because the shadow thereof is good. Oh, what were they trying to do? Under the shadow of the trees. They were trying to hide what they were doing. Therefore your daughters shall commit whoredom, and your spouses shall commit adultery. What were they doing on these hills? They were involved in every kind of betrayal of their spouses and their primary spouse, God. The Bible teaches that God is our husband. He's our husband. We belong to Him. When we become Christians, we become the Christ bride. Look at Revelation 21 in verse 2. I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. What's the New Jerusalem? He tells us. It's a bride being prepared for her husband. When the bride puts anything before her husband, she commits both adultery and idolatry. That is God. He's our husband. And the end result of adultery and idolatry is destruction. Nineveh had ruined many people. Now she's going to be ruined. Look at verse 5. Behold, I am against thee, saith the Lord of hosts, and I will discover thy skirts upon thy face, and I will show the nations thy nakedness, and the kingdoms thy shame. Doesn't that sound a little bit like what we saw in chapter 2 and verse 13? Behold, I am against thee, saith the Lord of hosts. Why? I will show the nations thy nakedness, thy shame, in other words. Behold, see it, observe it, pay attention. I'm against thee. Roper said, if God is against us, who can be for us? Who can keep God from taking vengeance on us if we disobey Him, if we dishonor Him? What should be the result of mankind's nakedness revealed to anyone other than their mate? What should be the result? Remember Adam and Eve in the garden? Eve yielded to the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. She took the fruit that Satan tempted her with, all of these primary things, the only things that can tempt any of us, the only actions, and she gave it to her husband, and he ate. He let her lead instead of him. Isn't that interesting? Because when you look at 2 Timothy, you see that God says men are to be the preachers. Why? And not be led by their wives as Eve led Adam. He was first formed, not her. But when they sinned, all of a sudden, they realized we're naked. But before that time, they had been naked, Genesis 2 and verse 25, and they had not been watching ashamed. Why would they be? They were innocent. Sin hadn't entered into the world. But now they're ashamed to be seen by anyone other than each other. Genesis 3 and verse 7. The eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. As you study Genesis a little further, you'll notice that fig leaves weren't good enough for God. It wasn't good enough. Fig leaves would have covered up what we call the essentials. So God made them skins. Took skins of animals, first sacrifice, by the way. You can't take the skins from the animals unless you kill them. God took skins and covered them, both, alike. Didn't just cover parts of them. As we studied, or maybe we didn't in class here, but in the studies of Genesis that I did down in Jackson, the original words show that they were covered from their neck to their ankles. What does that say about people today in the way we dress? I've often made the statement, it's just as wrong for a man to go topless as it is for a woman. If it's wrong for a woman, it's wrong for a man. It's just as wrong for a man to go in a bathing suit as it is for a woman to go in a bathing suit. Nineveh's shame, this text is telling us, Nineveh's shame is going to be exposed. It's evident that Nineveh was not destroyed by her physical opponents. You say, well, wait a minute, Bob. Haven't you said in the past that Babylon and the Medes and Persians involved together, and the Syrians, they're the ones that destroyed Nineveh? Yeah. But they weren't the ones who destroyed Nineveh. They could not have destroyed Nineveh during that time with the weapons they had if God hadn't been behind it. God's the one who destroyed them physically, destroyed their nation, destroyed their walls, and used nature and a physical army to do it. Look at verse 6. And I will cast abominable filth upon thee, and make thee vile, and will set thee as a gazing stock. God's going to do three things to Nineveh. He's going to cast abominable filth upon them. Back in the 1800s, if someone did something that was wrong, it wasn't unusual for them to be taken and put in stocks in a public place. You know, put their hands in the wooden stocks, their head in through it. And what would happen? The people of the village, or the city, in order to disgrace them, would throw filthy things on them. They'd throw rotten eggs, rotten meat, and worse. Abominable filth. This Hebrew word identifies an object that is abhorrent, or it could refer to something blasphemous. To throw disgusting and filthy things on something is to obscure its beauty. To whatever beauty might have been there, it's going to cover it up. It's going to degrade what it lands on. It's going to show contempt for that thing. Nineveh was a beautiful city on the outside, but now she's going to be seen for what she really was on the inside. Filthy, degraded. Second, the text says that God was going to make them vile. The word revile comes from nabal. It refers to something wearing out. And when something wears out, it may have been beautiful at one time. Something drying up, dying. It no longer holds the beauty that it used to. Jenny and I have a picture of ourselves when we were first dating. Boy, our skin looks so nice. You know, now I got all these scars all over my head and arms because of Agent Orange, and you look at it now and compare a picture now and you say, ugh, that's not the same. Why? I'm growing old. Wrinkles are coming. Now Jenny, she still looks as good as she ever did. At least to me she does. I still see her as that young gal. But that's what happens when something grows old. It begins to lose, quote, its beauty in the eyes of others. God is going to cause the vitality, the memory of this beautiful city to fade away. It will become nothing. Initially, the walls are going to be torn down. The places inside are going to be burned up and falling down and destroyed by the enemies. Like a flower, the beauty of Nineveh is going to dry up and fall away from its place of prominence at the head of the stem. Third, God's going to set them up as a gazing stock. They're going to be looked at with revulsion and or shock. They were so beautiful just a short time ago. Now the city would be looked upon with shock by those who knew what the city had looked like before. It'll be looked upon with revulsion. We don't want to be there anymore. What happened to Nineveh would be almost too horrible for people to contemplate, almost too astounding to believe. Look at verse 7. And it shall come to pass that all they that look upon thee shall flee from thee, and say, Nineveh is laid waste. Who will bemoan her? When shall I seek comforters for thee? The sight of Nineveh's destruction is going to cause all to flee away. Why? There's no more place of safety behind her walls. They've been broken down. They've been destroyed. Nineveh, at the time that this was written, no one would have believed it. Remember, Nahum was not written after Nineveh fell. It was not written at the time when they were besieged by all of these armies. It was not written at the time the river washed away a major portion of their wall on the river's side. At the time this was written, there were still a number of years before Nineveh was going to be destroyed. And here is a prophet of God. How were the prophets treated by the Israelites? They didn't believe them many times. They questioned them. They degraded them. They killed many of them. Here's a prophet of God saying, Nineveh is about to be destroyed. And yet, if you looked at Nineveh at this time, you wouldn't have thought, well, how are they going to be destroyed? Their walls are strong. Their armies are strong. They're still threatening people. No one in that time would have envisioned the possibility. Just like you and I a few years ago could not envision the wall in Berlin, Germany, coming down. We couldn't have envisioned the destruction of the Soviet Union in less than a year's time. But it happened. And everybody was amazed. That's how people were going to look at Nineveh right now. Oh, this can't happen. And then when it did, it's going to amaze them. Two questions are then posed in this text. Who will bemoan her? In other words, who will show grief for Nineveh's fall? Who's going to do that? And the second question is, when shall I seek comforters for thee? This word comforters, Nahum, means to breathe strongly, that is, to feel pity for someone who would want to avenge her. It's a lot different than the word we would think of using the English definition of comforters. The implication is that nobody will be found to feel pity for Nineveh or the Assyrians. No one could be found who would want to try and avenge Nineveh's fall at the hands of Babylon and the Medes. Nineveh was despised, terrorized, shamed, disrespected, and humiliated. They did that to the other nations, and now it's going to be done to them. It was Nineveh's turn to reap what she had sowed. and it was going to be a terrible destruction. Thousands and thousands would die from both armies. Those who survived would probably, many of them, starve to death, hiding from the enemy who was seeking them out, trying to find all of the survivors that they could to totally stamp out this nation so that they could never rise again in power. Next week we'll come back and we'll look at verses 8 through 10 beginning. And these verses are going to show us that Nineveh would be destroyed just like she had destroyed No. In the King James it just says No, but that stands for a city called No-Aman in Egypt. We better know it today as the city of Thebes in Egypt. But we'll come back there next week.